The coffee was still warm in Earl Harper's thermos when the first shot shattered the November silence at 5:54 a.m. 10 minutes later, 16 men would be dead over a deer stand worth $40. In the Ozark Mountains of Newton County, Arkansas, November 4, 1978 began like any other opening day of rifle season, cold, quiet, and full of anticipation. But beneath the surface of this rural hunting tradition simmered a territorial dispute that had been building for 3 generations, ever since the Harper and Culver families first laid claim to adjacent ridges along Cane Creek. What started as a missing $40 deer stand in October would ignite a coordinated ambush that law enforcement would later describe as the deadliest family feud in modern Ozark history. This is the story of how boundary lines, family pride, and mountain justice collided in 10 minutes of gunfire that left 16 hunters dead and 2 families destroyed forever. Earl Harper was 53 years old that morning. He'd been hunting Cane Creek Ridge since he was 8, taught by his father Clayton, who'd been taught by his father before him. The Harper family had owned 640 acres along the ridge since 1891, 87 years of continuous ownership, of knowing every hollow and creek bend, every deer trail and turkey roost. This wasn't just land to the Harpers, it was identity. It was legacy. It was worth defending. On October 12, 1978, Earl discovered that his custom-built deer stand, a 12-foot elevated platform he deconstructed from oak planks and galvanized steel, had been removed from its location on the western boundary of his property. The stand had taken him 3 weekends to build and cost roughly $40 in materials. But the financial value wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the message. The Culver family owned the adjacent property to the west, 580 acres that bordered the Harper land along a disputed fence line that had never been properly surveyed. For decades, both families had maintained an uneasy truce, hunting their respective sides without incident. But that October, everything changed. Earl's son, Wayne Harper, 28 years old and recently laid off from the lumber mill, had spotted the Culver family's eldest son, Dennis, using what appeared to be the Harper deer stand on Culver property, positioned less than 50 yards from the disputed boundary. When Wayne confronted Dennis at the local feed store on October 18th, the exchange was brief and hostile. "That stand was on our side of the line," Dennis Culver said, according to witness testimony later given to Arkansas State Police. "We moved it back where it belongs." "You stole it," Wayne replied, "and my daddy wants it back by Sunday, or we're coming to get it ourselves." Sunday came and went. The stand remained on Culver property. Earl Harper, a man described by neighbors as quiet but proud, made a decision that would cost 16 lives. He called a family meeting. Present at that meeting on October 22nd were Earl's 3 sons, Wayne Jr. and Michael, along with his 2 brothers, Vernon and Curtis, and 9 cousins who lived within a 10-mile radius. The Harper family, like many rural Ozark clans, operated on a simple code: family first, law second. When one Harper was wronged, all Harpers responded. The plan they developed was methodical. They would confront the Culver family on opening morning of rifle season, November 4th, when they knew the Culvers and their extended hunting party would be heading to their stands in the pre-dawn darkness. The Harpers would demand the return of the stand and an apology. If the Culvers refused, they would take the stand back by force. What Earl Harper didn't anticipate, or perhaps didn't care about, was that the Culver family had been preparing for exactly this scenario. Raymond Culver, the family patriarch at 61, had heard about the feed store confrontation. He'd also heard rumors through the tight-knit community that the Harpers were planning something. Raymond was a Korean War veteran who'd seen combat at Chosin Reservoir. He wasn't a man who waited to be ambushed. He prepared his own response. On November 3rd, the night before opening day, Raymond gathered his own family council. Present were his 4 sons, Dennis, Carl, Tommy, and Luke, along with 6 nephews and 2 brothers-in-law. 16 men total. Raymond's instructions were clear. They would hunt as planned, but they would go armed not just with hunting rifles, but with the expectation of confrontation. They would not back down. They would not surrender family property, and they would not apologize for defending what was theirs. November 4th, 1978. 5:30 a.m. The temperature was 38 degrees. A thin fog hung over Cane Creek Ridge as both families made their way through the timber in the darkness. The Harpers approached from the east. The Culvers were already positioned on the western slope, having arrived 30 minutes earlier. At 5:47 a.m., Earl Harper and his group of 14 men emerged into a clearing on what he believed was the boundary line between the two properties. Less than 70 yards away, partially obscured by oak trees and morning mist, Raymond Culver and his 16 men watched them approach. What happened next would be reconstructed later through ballistic evidence, witness testimony from 2 survivors, and a forensic timeline that took Arkansas State Police investigators 3 months to complete. At 5:54 a.m., Dennis Culver stepped into the clearing carrying the disputed deer stand. According to the sole surviving witness from the Culver side, Dennis's younger brother Luke, who was positioned 50 yards behind the main group, Dennis intended to return the stand and de-escalate the situation. Earl Harper saw it differently. To him, Dennis's appearance was a provocation. According to Wayne Harper's later testimony from his hospital bed before he died, Earl raised his hand, a prearranged signal, and the Harper men opened fire. The Culvers returned fire immediately. The clearing became a killing zone. The gunfire lasted 10 minutes from 5:54 a.m. to 6:04 a.m., but the carnage was devastating. Rifles designed to kill deer at 200 yards were being fired at men standing less than 75 yards apart. There was no cover, no retreat, just 2 lines of men with hunting rifles firing at each other until most were dead or too wounded to continue. When the shooting stopped, the silence was total. 11 men lay dead in the clearing. 9 died instantly from gunshot wounds to the chest, head, and abdomen. 2 more, Wayne Harper and Carl Culver, would die in the hospital within 24 hours. An additional 5 men were critically wounded, but survived the final death toll: 16 men, 8 from each family. Among the dead were Earl Harper, shot 4 times, Raymond Culver, shot twice through the chest, Dennis Culver, the man who'd tried to return the stand, shot in the head, and Junior Harper, Earl's youngest son at 23, shot in the abdomen and left to bleed out over 30 minutes before help arrived. The 2 survivors who could speak, Luke Culver and Michael Harper, were found in shock, sitting among the bodies, their rifles empty. Arkansas State Police arrived at 7:15 a.m., alerted by a local farmer who'd heard the sustained gunfire. What they found was described in official reports as a scene of mutual annihilation. Shell casings littered the clearing, over 200 rounds fired in 10 minutes. Blood trails indicated that several men had attempted to crawl away before dying. The disputed deer stand lay in the center of the clearing, shattered by gunfire, its oak planks splintered and soaked with blood. The legal aftermath was equally devastating. Michael Harper and Luke Culver were both charged with multiple counts of second-degree murder, though prosecutors struggled with the reality that both men had been defending themselves in a mutual firefight. In separate trials held in Little Rock in 1979, both were convicted. Michael Harper received 40 years and was paroled in 2003. Luke Culver received 35 years and died in prison in 1998 from a heart attack. The families that remained, widows, children, siblings, were shattered. The Harper property was eventually sold to a timber company in 1985. The Culver land was divided among surviving relatives, none of whom continued to hunt it. The clearing where 16 men died was left untouched, slowly reclaimed by oak saplings and undergrowth. In 1992, a small memorial plaque was placed at the site by a local historical society. It reads simply, "Here, on November 4, 1978, 16 men lost their lives in a dispute over land and pride. May their deaths remind us that no property is worth a human life." But that message came 14 years too late for the Harper and Culver families. The Ozark family war of 1978 remains the deadliest family feud in modern Arkansas history. It's studied in criminology courses as an example of how territorial disputes, economic pressure, and cultural codes of honor can combine into lethal violence. The 2 families never reconciled. To this day, descendants of the Harpers and Culvers do not speak, and somewhere in the overgrown timber along Cane Creek Ridge, buried beneath 46 years of leaves and saplings, lie the splinters of a $40 deer stand that cost 16 men their lives. The question that haunts everyone who studies this case is simple: could it have been stopped? The answer, according to law enforcement and psychologists who've analyzed the incident, is yes. At multiple points, the feed store confrontation, the family meetings, the night before opening day, intervention was possible. A phone call to the sheriff, a neutral mediator, a surveyor to settle the boundary dispute. Any of these could have prevented the massacre. But in the culture of the rural Ozarks in 1978, calling law enforcement was seen as weakness. Backing down was betrayal. and family honor was worth dying for. 16 men believed that, and 16 men proved it in 10 minutes of gunfire on a cold November morning. This is their story. Not to glorify the violence, not to romanticize the mountain code of justice, but to remember the cost of pride, the weight of legacy, and the thin line between defending what's yours and losing everything that matters.